I'm pretty recently retired, but before that, I was a park ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I was stationed at the Pittsburgh District of the Yocka-GAY-ney River Lake. There was a lot of variety to my job. I mostly enjoyed it because I got to be on a boat much of the time patrolling the waters. I helped manage the dam and how the water flowed downstream to meet flow requirements. I did have to do a lot of rule enforcement on the water, with so many people wanting to go too fast. I've always loved working outdoors. I never wanted to be confined to an office. I met a lot of different people and dealt with a lot of interesting situations. Nothing too crazy, really. But I had a strange experience one day that wasn't like anything I was familiar with. It was so out of the ordinary, and at first I thought, maybe there's something wrong with me. It was a cold afternoon, and I'd been doing my usual dock inspections. It was really early in the spring, and there was hardly any activity around at all. I was getting back on my boat, and something made me stop for a minute. I started hearing this sound that was similar to a breeze in the trees, but it was different. It was like this low buzzing sound. I had thought that it was the wind, but there wasn't even the slightest breeze. As I stood there, I started smelling ozone, and I saw this bluish haze drifting out of the woods. It wasn't a light, and it wasn't smoke. It was self-contained in like a shape, if you know what I mean. Almost ghostly and just drifting along. It made me feel really uneasy. I noticed that there was a strong static field that was making my skin tingle and my hair stand up. The blue sky had taken on a metallic shimmer. This lasted for just a couple minutes before the blue haze and those static effects started traveling away from me. I just felt kind of puzzled and was like, did I really just feel that? Oddly, my charged cell phone had lost most of its charge. I started up the boat and kept my eye on the shape. As I watched it, the haze started to coalesce into a small ball of light floating about eye level. I started to drive the boat downstream, and this sounds weird, but it felt like the ball of light was waiting for me. As I came nearer, it started following me exactly parallel. Sometimes when I went around a bend in the river, I'd lose it, but then it would reappear again a minute later at eye level, parallel to the boat. This went on for about 10 to 15 minutes before I lost it again for a while. I proceeded to the next dock I had to inspect and just kind of brushed the whole thing off. But then it appeared again. But this time, it was closer and appeared to be slowly approaching me. I've never been superstitious at all, but I had the feeling it was coming closer to study me. It lingered there, just looking at me. Then, after a few minutes, it started heading towards some trees. I don't really know what possessed me, but I decided I wanted to follow it. It wasn't going very fast. I didn't want to get too close, but I wanted to keep it in sight. It was like the color of an LED flashlight, bright white with a slight blue tinge around the edges. It was about the size of a baseball. As we got deeper into the trees, it started disappearing and reappearing, almost like it was blinking on and off, but really slowly. I started feeling like it was a game. It would blink off, and then after a bit it would blink on, but would be in a different direction. After that happened maybe half a dozen times, it blinked on, but then it dissipated and spread into the same hazy blue shape I'd originally seen. It drifted really low to the ground and seemed to spread out and disappear. I couldn't help myself. I had to go look at the ground where it had disappeared. I made my way over there and saw there was an area on the ground that was glowing very faintly. I wouldn't have been able to see it except that it was in a very dark, shady area. I picked up a dirt clod and could see that it had a faint glow. I held it really gently so it wouldn't break apart and I could take it back to the boat. Besides my initial uneasiness when that static had been in the air, I never felt like the orb was hostile. Mostly I was just fascinated. I really wanted to figure out what was going on. The fact that it seemed intelligent was mind-bending. I had so many questions. How would the power source work for something like that? Was it some kind of electrical energy or combined gases? Was it of the Earth or something alien? I've got no explanation, natural, logical, or otherwise, to explain what happened that afternoon. I finally went back to the boat and took the dirt clod with me, but by the time I got it home, it didn't have any glow left. Maybe I should have tested it, but I guess I felt a little too weird about it all. This story happened to me a few months ago, and I've recently been experiencing some strange things that I think are related. I was traveling for work a lot at the time. I recently decided to quit my job to work for myself and build my own business, so I had to take whatever small jobs I could until I was fully up and running. I had one job that was about 2 hours away from home, and I decided it would be best to just commute back and forth. I honestly didn't mind the time spent driving anyway. I had to be on the job site at 6 a.m., so I usually tried to leave around 3:30 so I could make it on time, or a little early. Better early than late any day. I made myself some coffee and kissed my kids on the forehead while they were asleep like I did every morning. I was driving for about 15-20 minutes when I started to notice something strange in the sky. I was the only car on the road, and there weren't many houses around me. There was a lot of farmland, but that didn't explain what I saw. I saw 3 lights rotating back and forth. It was very rhythmic, almost hypnotic to look at. I immediately wondered if it could be a UFO. I believe in aliens. I think it's impossible for aliens not to exist. But I've never been sure about UFOs on Earth. Now, I left early, so I figured I had a small window of time to investigate and take some pictures. Even if I was late, I think seeing a UFO first thing in the morning is an interesting enough thing to excuse 15 minutes of tardiness. I pulled over to the side of the road and got out of the car, looking up at the sky. Honestly, I was excited. This was just a really cool thing to see, and I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so I'd love it if there was something out of this world. I wanted to try and take a video of it, so I pulled out my phone. But before I could open the camera app, I saw a bright light coming from the center of the other lights. It looked like it was far away from me, like I had absolutely no idea if this thing saw me on the ground. But in a flash, this blinding white light filled my vision and I couldn't see anything. It was so bright and disorienting that I fell over trying to get back to my car. Alongside the light was this shrill humming noise. I couldn't even hear myself groaning while I tried to feel around for my car. It was such a strange sensation. I couldn't see or hear anything. I felt helpless. The light quickly faded and I found myself in the center of the field I was parked in front of. At first, I thought I might have crawled the opposite direction of my car when I was blinded. But as I walked back to the car, I realized there was a chain-link fence I wouldn't have been able to crawl past. I looked for my phone on the ground around my car. I needed to see if I got any video evidence of what just happened to me. When I found it, I saw that I had 18 text messages from my wife, 2 missed calls from the client I was working for, and about a dozen calls from my wife and mom with voicemails asking where I was. The time said it was 11:48 p.m. It had to have been around 3:45 a.m. when this all happened, and now it was almost midnight? I couldn't understand how that was possible. It felt like I was in the light for maybe 5 minutes tops. I immediately called my wife and told her I was okay and I'd explain everything when I got home. They apparently tried to file a missing persons report with the police, but they advised her to wait a little longer. I got home and told her everything. I knew she had a hard time understanding it, but I think she tried her best to believe me. In her defense, I probably wouldn't have believed it right away either. I went to take a shower, and when I got out, I walked into the bedroom to grab some pajamas and get ready for bed. My wife stopped me and looked at my back. There were dark bruises covering it. She said it looked like I'd been beaten up. I inspected the rest of my body and found a small scar on the inside of my arm. I don't know where it came from, but it struck me as odd. Now, a few months after it happened, I've been having these strange, vivid dreams. I'm always surrounded by the white light and I can't sense anything at all. But I can feel hands on me, like I'm being pulled and tossed around a little bit. I've been having bad migraines too. I used to get them as a kid, but I'm having them once a week now, and they're debilitating when they come. Obviously, my job has been impacted by that alone. I saw a doctor about it, and he just gave me some pain meds to take when the migraine comes. I just can't shake the feeling that this is all related to what happened that morning. I feel crazy trying to explain it to people. I don't think my wife believes what I'm experiencing is from that, and that it's causing some problems in our marriage. I want to try and find local groups of people who have experienced similar things, but I don't even trust that they're not wackos making it up for attention. Any advice or help would be really appreciated. I grew up in a relatively poor rural area. The train tracks ran right through our section of town. As the trains rattled by, the walls of our house would shake. With each passing train came the drifters. People rode the rails in search of jobs or a sense of freedom. Because the train would slow down as it approached the town, many of these drifters would hop off while others hopped onto the train. I was outside when one of these drifters walked by my yard. He stopped alongside the fence and asked if I had a cigarette to spare. I said sure as I reached into my coat pocket. My dog rounded the corner from the backyard, immediately growled at the stranger and showed its teeth. I apologized to the man and told him this wasn't like my dog at all. She'd lick you to death, if anything. The man quickly left, obviously upset with the treatment from my dog. The dog quieted down as soon as the man disappeared, but still seemed nervous. Over the next several days, my neighbors reported that a dog had knocked over their trash, a real mess of everything. I assured them it wasn't my dog, although I'm pretty sure they didn't believe me as my trash was left alone. For several days, I continued to see the drifter from before. He'd bum a cigarette off me every now and then, and we made small talk. He always kept an eye out for my dog, but I told him not to worry as she was stuck inside. We talked about life in general and where he was headed next. The man gave me his life story, but I gave him precious little. Sometimes your life story is worth more than any amount of cash. Before he left, the drifter told me he'd be heading out in the next couple days. He only likes staying in an area for a few days before heading to the next place. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to travel from place to place. No family to speak of, just you and the rails. In a way, that's all some people need. My neighbors would be happy when they found out that my trash was targeted next by the rogue dog. I heard it rummaging around through the bins, but couldn't get out there soon enough to get a good look at it. It did a good job cleaning up the leftovers from my chicken dinner. Maybe it will end up choking on a bone, and that would be the end of it. It took me a while to clean up all the trash. When I tipped up the last bin, I noticed this massive track in the mud. It was definitely a canine track. This thing was huge. The track was bigger than any dog track I ever had, and I had a Great Dane once. It had to be some trick. Maybe it just looked huge because of the mud, or at least that's what I was hoping for. I smoothed over the mud to get rid of the track. Out of sight, out of mind. When I met with the neighborhood circle, one of the guys was talking about this massive dog he'd seen the night before. He said it was as long as a man, and its paws were enormous. It saw him, growled, and then ran off down the alley. It was rooting through the trash, he said. That would explain what I saw, but I couldn't believe it. I had to see it with my own eyes. That night, a bunch of the guys and I walked around the neighborhood looking for this beast. We searched everywhere, but we didn't find any trace of it. The drifter stopped by in the morning. He decided to stay a couple more days before heading down the line. I offered him a shower because he smelled terrible. The mix of musky dog and garbage. He gladly accepted, and I immediately regretted my decision. It took me the rest of the day to clean up after him. The smell was god-awful, and I had all I could do not to gag. Again that night, a bunch of the guys and myself went out on patrol. Looking back now, I have no idea what we planned to do if we saw it, because none of us carried any weapons. We just assumed it was a regular old dog that would be harmless. Man, I was wrong. I walked down an alley near my house and spotted the drifter. He looked distressed, almost in pain. The closer I got, the more hair I saw covering his body. I never noticed all that hair before. He looked at me with horror in his eyes, as if I had discovered some long-kept secret. He ran into a side alley. As I approached the alley that he went down, I could hear bones breaking and skin tearing. Then an ear-splitting roar cut the air. Instantly, I felt scared and vulnerable. The beast must have gotten the drifter, I thought. Then, at a dead run, the creature ran at me from the alleyway. In a single bound, it leapt onto me and bit my arm. Blood started to stream down my face from the wound. The great dog shook me like a rag doll. I thought I was a goner. The guys from the neighborhood circle came running down the alleyway to scare off the beast. I told them to check the alleyway for the drifter. He had to be dead, but they didn't find anything. They figured the dog creature dragged him off. The cops came, but that was a waste of time. There was little they were willing to do, and they didn't care about some drifter either. Ultimately, they must have felt the dog creature did them a favor. Now that I reflect on what happened, I know the creature was the drifter. Everything was there. He was covered in hair, something I didn't see before. Then his tracks turned into dog tracks. I knew this because I went back into the alleyway. Then I found his clothes torn to bits as well. The realization hit me like a sack of potatoes. It took a while for my wound to heal. I moved away to another town, far away from the train tracks. I didn't ever want to meet a drifter again. I still have nightmares every night. I hope he never finds me to finish the job, but I'm prepared if he does.